Is it okay to draft dodge? It's a question that could potentially become a lot more relevant than we hope. Um, so yeah, let's talk about it. I recently had to do a case about this, writing about this for a class, and I came up with what I think is a pretty good answer, and I'll give my arguments for it, what they're kind of rooted in, where they come from, and then I'll also address some common objections to it. So first off, my question was, is it ethically permissible to draft dodge service to an unjust war? And I said yes, it was. And the key word to note there is unjust. But that's pretty subjective. Of some people think a war is just, some people think it's unjust. So who decides who's right and wrong? Can everyone just go, I don't want to, but because I think it's unjust, can they just throw that around? Well, I used what's been outlined as the just war theory. It started, I think, all the way Plato and Cicero were talking about it. St. Augustine talked a lot about it. And then more recently, like in the 70s, Michael Walzer wrote a book just called Just and Unjust Wars. Let me make sure that's the right title. Just and Unjust Wars. And that really kind of solidified it. So what just war theory says is that a war can only be just if it has a just cause, comes from legitimate authority, is rightly intentioned, is a last resort, has a reasonable chance of success, and the expected good outweighs the expected harm. So breaking that down just a little bit, just cause, obviously it has to be for a good reason. It can't be for, the people, like political figures' personal gain. It can't be out of malicious intent. It has to be someone that's, good, is reasonable, comes from legitimate authority. So like I said, it has to be something from a president that's gone through all the legal channels. It can't be just a private thing. You can't bypass, Congress or whatever the legal channels are for whatever country it is. Is rightly intentioned. That kind of ties in with the first one, just cause, and even those can be a little bit morally ambiguous, but with writers like St. Augustine, obviously he adopted a more Christian standpoint for what is good, what is bad, but those can be, I feel like those are the weakest points because they could be pretty easily manipulated by a leader potentially. But moving on, a last resort, that's a really important one, that you don't just jump straight in the war. You try to resolve things peacefully first. You try ceasefires. You try coming to agreements. Like, you try all this before you declare a full-on war. Has a reasonable chance of success. That's an important one. If it's a suicide mission and I'm wanting to send the people, say I'm in charge and I know it's a suicide mission, we're not going to win. It would not be just for me to send people in knowing that there's not a reasonable chance of success. And then the expected good outweighs the expected harm, because in any war, killing people, war is not good. You could say that there's justified reasons for it, but war itself is not good. So it's important to make sure that you are going to be causing harm, regardless. If you're in a war, you're going to be causing harm. There's no getting around that. But just that the good that would come out of it outweighs the harm that you're causing, or that the war itself would cause. My second argument was rooted in consequentialism, where the morality of an action is based solely on the consequences of it. So if participating in a war is going to cause harm and suffering, then my refusal of it, or even my active protesting of it, is the morally justifiable thing to do. A common objection that'll probably come up if you're watching this, and it was one that I even thought of, was, when you're living in a state, you're part of this social contract with it where, if I pay my taxes and, and in service for the draft, and especially it is becoming a mandatory at the end of this year that I'll automatically be registered for it, that if my country decides to go to war, I owe it to them, and it's just part of living in America, living in this state. Well, my response to that would be, well, yes, if this is a war that is just, passes all these just war theory tests, is a war that is in the best interests of the American people or of the people of the states, then I would say, yes, you do have an obligation to serve. And that's just part of this social contract. There is something to be said about how in the modern day, you know, it's really a non-consensual thing with the whole social contract. It's not like where you can really, you know, be out of the government's reins at this point and you can really truly live off them. But that's a different topic. Anyways, what I'm saying is that the social contract goes both ways, and that the government, we will provide for the government, and in turn they will act in our best interest. So if the war isn't meeting these, and it's not a just war, it's not a war that is in the interest of the best people of the state, then the contract is void and you don't have to live up your end because the government's not living up theirs. Another objection that would probably come up is a lot of people say, well, it's the laws. They're here for a reason. We should follow the laws. We follow the laws because they're the laws, as my friend Joe likes to say. But what I'd like to point out is that a legal obligation is not the same thing as a moral obligation. And our question isn't, is it legal to draft dodge? That's a set answer. Is it ethically permissible? Is it morally justifiable? I think laws are oftentimes outdated and are anticipated in ideal circumstances when they're written. That's probably worded bad. What I mean is, when the laws and rules are written, they're probably assuming that the government is acting properly, how it should be. But yeah, laws do not mean the same as morals. Think about it like in Nazi Germany, you know? If you shouldn't really be following the laws if they're immoral. Slavery was legal. It does not mean it's moral just because it's the law. So that's, you know, grow up. But yeah, these are just my thoughts. If you disagree, no judgment. It's, you know, we're all different people. Let me know if you have anything to add, anything to disagree with, any other objections. Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Thank